today, this podcast is going to be a little bit different. I want to talk about something that's kind of controversial, given that we are less than 2 months out from the midterm elections. And this could be a really big midterms because the right now Democrats control both houses of Congress. And for quite a while, they've been saying that there was going to be a big red wave and Republicans were going to take over both houses. It was going to be a huge tsunami. After Roe, after SCOTUS overturned Roe, the red tsunami is looking more like maybe some solid surfable waves. And some of that has to do with a lot of minority votes. And in this instance, we're going to be focusing on the Black vote. I'm going to be bringing in my friend Melik Abdul, who has actually been filling in guest co-hosting on, if you listen to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik, he and Reese Everson have been guest co-hosting. Melik is Black, conservative from the South. So I thought who better to discuss all of this with me than my friend Melik. Melik, I'm going to bring you in now. Hey.
Manila, thanks for having me.
I've missed you in the last 24 hours.
I know. I miss you guys too. Unfortunately, I can't say that I was up that early to listen.
Hey, I don't blame you. You know, the early hours on Sputnik, those are still hard for me. And it's been like 6 months. But, you know, I think we've put out some good radio. I think the listeners
Absolutely
really enjoyed having you and Reese on. And one of the things that made your appearance as a fill-in guest co-host very interesting or unique is the fact that you are a conservative. You're a conservative commentator. I've known you for several years. You've always spoken out over the last several years on Republican issues. And, you know, as you and I have talked about, the left likes to make it about race. And the fact that you are Black and conservative is a big deal. Why is it so shocking? Why is it such a big deal to anybody that you happen to be Black?
Yeah, I think it's well, I don't think. Let's look at the numbers. And we've heard this many times before, but Black people vote upwards of about 90% for Democrat. That's at not just the local level, but at the presidential level as well. And so we are the single largest partisan voting bloc in American history. So to find anyone, I mean, when you have those type of numbers, 9 out of every 10 Black person you meet, they're going to vote Democrat. It is something that's different. You don't see, and because you don't see that elsewhere, you don't see there's a split when it comes to white people. Even though more like the Asian community, they typically vote Democrat, but the numbers are nowhere near 90%. The numbers are nowhere near that for the Hispanic community. So it is so ingrained in our culture that Black people are associated with the Democratic Party. To find anyone, and many times I can't tell you the number of times I have. I've been in an Uber, or we're talking politics or something, and they'll just start talking about Republicans or Black Republicans and not even assume that, maybe this guy is a Republican. They have no idea because they automatically,
it's a default.
By default, they associate me with the Democratic Party. It happens so frequently. Like at first I used to get offended by it, but it happens so frequently that I just kind of shrug like, oh boy, here we go again. And so now I know how to, because it was hard for me. I found myself initially pushing back, even though I wouldn't out myself, I found myself pushing back. But now I'm at a point where I don't internalize it in the same way. So I would say I kind of compartmentalize it, and I'll just try to move the conversation along or just let them speak. But even think about something like that. You have someone who knows nothing about you, but you are just allowing yourself to recede to the back and just say, I would just rather not deal with it. Imagine having to do that about any, whether you're a woman or a man or whatever the case may
It's a
be.
stereotype, right? At the end of the day,
Yeah,
that's what it is. It's a stereotype.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
are they?
And
How do people respond then? If and when you did correct them, how do people respond when they find out that you are a conservative?
I very seldom do. I will say that I actually haven't had, in the Black community, believe it or not, I haven't had many negative responses unless it was on Twitter, the cesspool
Really?
of Twitter.
Yes, of course. The
People
dumpster
who
fire.
absolutely, when you're talking about bottom of the barrel, I get all of that from Twitter. But if I'm actually having a conversation with someone, I would say maybe about 97% of the disgust and the pushback have come from white liberals, specifically white women and white gay men. It has
Really?
been, oh my goodness. I remember there was a case, it was a couple of years ago, pre
That's
COVID.
who's offended by you being a Black Republican.
Absolutely. It was a local restaurant here, right, 15th Street, close to the White House. I won't say the
Mhm.
name, but it
Right.
were two friends of mine and I. We were heading to the restaurant, a very popular spot. And as we were walking into the restaurant, we said, it was a group of middle-aged white women, and they seemed like they had had quite a few drinks. And we were just kind of joking with them, and they asked where we were coming from because we were all dressed in suits, and they asked where we
Oh.
were coming from, and we said Trump Hotel. Oh boy, why did we say that? And so she said, well, why would you guys, and one of the ladies, she said, well, why would you guys be at Trump Hotel? And I said, well, we're all Republican. And she flipped out. She said, Republican? What do you mean you are a Republican? Do you understand how Donald Trump views you? And we're literally on the street outside this very popular restaurant, and this middle-aged white woman is telling us not about Donald Trump. She's telling us about how much of an embarrassment we were, that we don't know what was good. We don't know what was good for us. We don't know what the Republican Party means for us. And this has been a consistent thing, particularly with white women and white gay men, where they have tried to explain to us, not just our own blackness, but essentially
Wow.
push this narrative that somehow we don't know what's good for us. I mean, it has happened so frequently. And while you would think that I would have these type of experiences with black people, considering how many Democrats are out
Right.
there, it has come from these two same groups, but it is a larger, if you think about it, these are the people who you see marching in the streets.
Yes.
These are,
At the
whether it's the
BLM
women's,
protests, all that
the
stuff.
very same people, the gaslighters. I always say that these are the same people who will show up to what is now Black Lives Matter Plaza, throw up their
Yes.
Black Power fists, and go right back to their HR offices and toss Melik's resume. These are the same people, but they want to, this whole virtue signaling. Oh, I care about black people.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that they don't care about black people, but there is a narrative that they know what's better for me than I know for myself. And it's an extension of liberal policies. It's an extension of that, where they feel as if we have the black community's best interest at heart, and we know what's better for you than what you would know yourself.
Right, especially for your own self, for your how you want to vote, who you want to vote for. Now, I mean, I hear similar stories from a very close girlfriend of mine, who's back home, who's Black, and she's an LAPD officer. That's already a taboo, and she's a
Mm-hmm.
conservative. Taboo, double taboo, right? So she wears the badge, and she's Black, and she's experienced similar things as well. And you know, I don't know what to tell her, because like with myself, I don't really identify left or right. I'm not a single issue voter. And I think you find a lot of Asians like me. They tend to vote Democrat usually. But if you really start talking to the Asian community, Asians, when you really sit them down and ask random Asian strangers what they think about topic A, B, C, D, and go on down the line, they end up really being all over the place. But when they
Yep.
go to vote, they tend to vote blue
Hmm.
team most of the time. But it's not unusual to find an Asian conservative, and nobody raises an eyebrow or bats an eye
Right.
at an Asian conservative. Someone like me, no, definitely nobody thinks anything. Somebody, that's not a single issue voter. And sometimes I vote, Democrat here, Republican there, independent here. I'm all over the place. That's pretty common. But with the Black community, I didn't realize it was in the 90th percentile
Yeah.
that's what they vote. I mean, I knew it was heavily Democrat. I didn't realize it was in the 90s. I was thinking maybe in the 70s.
Oh my
I'm
goodness,
shocked.
no. Keep in mind Donald Trump. So John McCain received 4% of the black vote in 2008. Mitt Romney received 6% of the black vote in 2012. Now we
Okay,
can
so that's
attribute
10.
that to, yeah, we can attribute that to Barack Obama. So Barack Obama was president. Well, even with Donald Trump this last time around, depending on which poll you're looking at with Donald Trump, even though he increased his percentage from
Yeah.
2016, he still got about maybe between 8 and 10 percent of the black vote, which means there's 90% out there who did not vote for Donald Trump. So this happens at the local level and the local level, state level, presidential level. And black women vote in, I think, they average around 95% vote for Republicans, which is why you typically don't see
Wait,
a
vote
lot of
Republican?
black Republican. Yeah, I'm sorry, Democrat.
Oh,
Sorry,
I was gonna say,
Democrat.
really?
Yeah, so that's why you don't see, even as far as a representation, because Donald Trump increased his percentage, almost doubled his percentage of the black male vote. I
Right.
think black women voted for Hillary Clinton by 97% in 2016, and I think it went down for Biden maybe till about 96, 94. So when you have numbers such as that,
Yeah. That's
yeah,
unheard of in politics.
that's why I say we're the single largest partisan voting bloc in American history. People don't like that. Obviously, it offends their sensibilities, but the numbers speak for themselves. And I should
Wow.
say, um, a lot of this is, I would say, social conditioning. And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is if you grew up in rural West Virginia or Tennessee, or even if you grew up in rural Idaho or Iowa, and you grew up around Republicans, whether you're white, black, Asian, or whatever, more than likely you're going to vote Republican.
Sure.
So it's not until people start to kind of learn themselves, get their political footing, that they shift away from what their environment is. So I don't think that we're not alone when it comes to voting aligned with the environment in which we were raised. What we don't do, we don't then, I would say, grow up and then start to shift away because we've kind of starting to view politics in a different way. We are alone in that part.
Well, let me ask you this about your personal situation, I guess we can call it, because I think you said you started out as when you were young, started out as a Democrat.
Yes. So I first registered as a Democrat. I was a Democrat all the way up until 2016. I voted for Bernie in the primary of 2016. I knew under no circumstance would I vote for Hillary Clinton because I rejected
Right.
both what she and her husband stood for when it came to not just the black community, but just in Democratic politics altogether. I rejected them. So I recoiled at the idea that I had to vote for Hillary Clinton.
Right.
But I started as a Jeb Bush supporter because I continue to be a fan of the Bush family. I actually started my government career as a GW Bush political appointee. And so I learned a lot of things about government, but also I began to question my politics during that time. Even though I voted for Barack Obama twice, I voted for him in 2008. I actually volunteered with his campaign. But I started to see when I was in the Bush administration that many of the things that I expected of,
Mhm.
let's say, the federal government, these things actually happening at the local level. So a lot of assumptions that I had about, oh, well, federal government or so president is supposed to do this specifically for the Black community. And that continued even when Barack Obama was in office, because there were things that I assumed about Barack Obama being president of the United States that just weren't true. And I realized I was projecting a lot of expectations onto Barack Obama that simply were not realistic. Again, the things that were impacting me around education, around crime, around things like, police reform or housing or, business development, these things are actually, they touch me at the local level. But I always assumed that it was big brother, big federal government. You're the person who's supposed to solve these things. But when it comes to the Black community, there aren't things that the federal government does that is really specific to the Black community. And they don't do that all the time. And I felt myself drifting away, even, when voting for Barack Obama, I felt myself questioning more my politics and drifting away, because sometimes I would say, well, why are we blaming Barack Obama for this? Or why do we think, or, George Bush got a lot of criticism after the Hurricane Katrina. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I was on the opposite side of that, because again, I not just worked in federal government where I worked at the time. The vice presidential motorcade. So when Dick Cheney went home, the vice president motorcade went past our street. And so it was a thing. So I'm saying that to say that I knew what a presidential or vice presidential motorcade looked like. So when George W. Bush was looking from that window, from that plane, and he got a lot of criticism from it. And Kanye West said that he really didn't care about Black people. And he was being criticized for not being on the ground in New Orleans.
Yeah.
I knew at the time, I was like, so you guys don't understand the resources that are required for a presidential visit. And I realized that no one in the media was even saying that. No one was saying,
questioned it.
Like no one, because it was just the talking. And keep in mind, this was before like social media,
Right.
because this was 2005. And so when I
Right.
was listening to all of my trusted Democratic sources saying, why isn't George Bush there? Well, CNN is there. This network is there. And I'm saying, but you guys don't realize the security, like right now, the streets are flooded, and you don't realize the resources that would be taken away from what's happening on the ground in order to accommodate a president of the United States. And so I began to realize that, well, first of all, media is unfair. Like media,
that's the first time you realized it.
That is when I began, and ironically, when I was still a Republican, before I started voting for supporting Barack Obama.
When you were a
or
Democrat,
anything.
you mean?
I'm sorry, when I was still a
Democrat.
Democrat.
Before you went to the red team.
Before I even voted for Barack Obama, I was saying to myself, the media does a hit job. And I said that because of the things that I understood about the federal government. And people were saying, this is what the federal government should be doing for the Black community. And I would say, okay, like what? Like, tell me specifically the things that the federal government should do.
Let's back up and explain to the viewers what you mean about the resources on the ground that would be needed to, usher a president through even one block, right? I mean, you need
it's not just
there's
local
8
police.
cars. Yeah, there's 8 cars ahead of him. There's Secret Service.
It's an entire entourage.
Right.
So,
you need a sweep, right? A full sweep of that area. Make sure there's no bombs, no guns,
before the president gets there, and I can't think of what it's a name that I can't think of. But there are Secret Service agents who are sent to an area days before a presidential visit, like before the president even hits the ground. You have, so those are resources that are required. when the president lands in Air Force One, and keep in mind, this was during the hurricane. So the president doesn't fly on, Delta Airlines. The president uses Air Force One when he travels. And so that is another resource that's requirement. So you not only have the local police, you have the presidential fleet of vehicles, and people were saying that all of that should have been in New Orleans, and it's just impossible. And it's difficult for people to conceive that, because they have, they may have just seen it on television, right, but it is a lot that's required. And it's not just 1, 2, 3, or 4 vehicles. Sometimes it's 5 or 6 vehicles, because if the president is not traveling in the Beast itself, then right, there are like decoy vehicles. And so you don't necessarily, the windows are so dark, you don't know which vehicle right, the president is in. And that's by design.
Those of us who have lived in the DC area, we have seen the motorcade. So we know traffic is brought to a complete standstill. You have a whole entourage of vehicles front and back between the Beast. I mean, when you're walking through downtown DC, I mean, I'll never forget, almost a decade ago when I first moved downtown, and I was walking between the studio to go home, and I was stopped dead in my tracks. Policemen stopped me, local police. They're in charge of stopping traffic. They stop traffic. I'm asking, what's going on? I just want to cross the street to go home. But I live downtown. I live near the White House. I didn't understand what was going on. I was new there. I'm from Los Angeles. This doesn't happen, right? So I'm thinking, it's just a car wreck or whatever. I let me walk around. Nope, nothing doing. When the president is coming, and I stood there and waited for like 10 minutes before before the motorcade even came. There's cops, there's Secret Service, multiple cars in front, then his actual Secret Service vehicles, then some other Suburbans, and then you see the Beast. Usually it's not the Beast when he's driving around town. It's like the Beast of a Suburban. And then with, the flags on it, and more Suburbans behind that, and then more police detail behind that. That's what's required. Anybody that's been to DC that's been stopped because of presidential motorcade traffic, that's what has to happen. And it is. I think it's. I wouldn't say it's a law, but I know it's something official they have to do. It's officially something they must do.
And there is no, and so people will know, it's not like they're just driving, coasting down the street. No, right, they're speeding down the street, they're speeding through lights. You see the Secret Service agents with their rifles. Yep. It's like a whole production.
The whole thing. It's a whole thing. And that's why President Bush couldn't be on the ground during the flood.
Which obviously is how he ended up going to, I think it was past Christian. He ended up having that press conference in Mississippi. And I don't say that to excuse anything about the federal government's response to Hurricane Katrina, because I think it is valid to criticize that effort. But I also understand that there is nothing that our federal government has never responded to a disaster well.
Right.
Like, they learn from their mistakes, but they've never responded well. Now we're in a much better position now because of what happened in Hurricane Katrina to respond to these sort of things. But like when things like that initially happened, nothing. Right. Even before 9/11, people don't realize before 9/11, you could drive in front of the White House.
Yes, that's true.
You can't do that anymore because it's all blocked off.
That's right.
So we've learned many things since then. But I say all of that, so I started to think of the federal government different, and, realizing that, especially by the time that Trump, 2016, I said, well, if Hillary Clinton becomes the nominee, I am out of here. Like,
I'm out.
That is the last straw, because I felt as if I didn't have a place in the Democratic Party, because that conservative, like Bill Clinton, DLC, which is the Democratic Leadership Council, I think that was his thing. They no longer existed. So I had to be all left. I had to be uber progressive, or I didn't have a place in the Democratic Party. So it was one of those where I just felt as if I was drifting away from the party that I had been a part of ever since I registered to vote. And I began to say, wait a minute. So am I conservative?
But is that
Maybe
really
I'm.
you? Is that you drifting away, or is it the party and its proclaimed values shifting away
So
from where you
you
stood?
know what? So I hear a lot of people say that the Democratic Party left me, but it's actually not that. I left the Democratic Party because I realized that I had no place in the Democratic Party. Someone who thinks like me, who was more moderate and not
I see.
necessarily a left winger.
I see.
I couldn't relate to many of that. But it was assumed because I am black that, and from, oh, well, yeah, you have to be Mr. Progressive and you have to be, and there are things that I do support. I support gay marriage. I support all of that type of stuff. But I did not have a place in the party because the party didn't have room for people like me. So when I was saying that I'm not supporting Hillary Clinton, people were like, what? Are you kidding me? How could you not? Bill Clinton, he was the first black president.
Ah,
And I was like, that never appealed to
wow.
me. Like, that never appealed to me, this whole Bill Clinton first black,
Yeah, I
because I
never
was
got
never
that.
impressed with them.
I never
But
understood how I mean, let's if the shoe was on the other foot and somehow, I don't know, Bill Clinton did something stereotypical Asian. Let's say he was excellent at geometry or algebra, whatever, right? Some kind of Asian stereotype. And they're like, "Oh, he's the first Asian president." I'd have been like, "Excuse me? That I'm
see,
being reduced I'm reduced to a math equation?
it
Being
is
Asian,
something
that's what it is?"
specific in the black community. We have and a lot of it is due to our history in the country, which I always acknowledge. But we are happy when people like get us. And so Bill Clinton, he was cool. He played the saxophone. He was
Right.
on Arsenio Hall show.
Right.
He liked Aretha Franklin. So he was hip, and we liked those type of things. But then I realized that those are performative. Like the
Right.
things that you're talking about, these are performative things. And so I said to myself, I was like, wow, these things that I thought were just so innate, like if you are black, then this is the stuff that you're supposed to do if you are black. And I realized, I was like, well, and even now, like my family's I think I'm the only Republican in my family. I'm the only one that I know. But my mom, all of them are definitely hardcore Democrats. But I joke with my mom now, and I was like, but mom, the stuff. So when you raising us, we had to go to school. We had to be respectful. There was no such thing of getting involved in any type of vice. We didn't smoke cigarettes. We didn't, we were not wild children. We respected authority because so many police officers existed in our community. We went to church. We valued family, all of those things. And so I joke with my mom and I tell her, it's like, well, mom, you actually were a conservative. You just didn't embrace it. And we joke about it, but it's actually true. So those things that are now typically, conservative, my
Conservative
mom still
values.
feels, yeah, my mom still feels the same way now. She just happens to be a Democrat, but
She
nothing
identifies.
about, yeah, nothing about how she raised us changed. Like nothing even about me changed. Embracing my conservatism, people assume that, oh well, you became a conservative and so you changed. No, these are all of the things that I did, like the feelings that I have. And even being from Mississippi, because as you can imagine, there are a lot of assumptions people make about being from Mississippi. It's like, oh well, we know it was terrible for you because racism is so bad in Mississippi. And so when I tell people, well, I can't say I've experienced. I don't know what those racist experiences were in Mississippi. People are shocked. But what do you mean? You're from Mississippi. How could you not experience racism in Mississippi? And so when I start asking them, well, that means what? So your version of me experiencing racism would look like what?
Right.
Because I went to an all-black elementary school. I went to an all-black middle school. I went to an all-black high school. And even in situations where, I was around, like I never had a negative experience outside of a teacher, but I never had a negative experience with a single white person growing up. But the assumption is because you were Black and from Mississippi, then things were really bad for you. That wasn't my experience. My mother experienced it. My mother talks about, sneaking to
The,
drink water after
the
the whites only.
generational thing, obviously.
Yes, it
Obviously.
wasn't the same for me. She talks about sneaking to drink water out of the whites only water fountain just to see if the water tasted the same. Obviously, it tasted the same, but that was her experience. So I didn't grow up, even though, white people are in a community, but I didn't grow up hating white people. I didn't live in, my family, I didn't exist in a family that hated white people, that,
Yeah.
because you are Black, then you are victimized by white people. Didn't bother me. We
Nobody
didn't
told you
bother
that.
white people. It wasn't a thing, but the narrative is, because I am Black and from Mississippi, then I had to have it really bad. I tell
Right.
people the first time I was called an N-word by somebody who wasn't Black was when I moved to DC.
Really? So as an
The first
adult?
and as an adult, the first time I was called the N-word by a white person is when I moved to DC. I was never called an N-word by
Anyone back home?
no, no, it just didn't exist. But people find it so hard to believe because they have perceptions. Again, because you are Black, this has to be what your experience is. And it's just not that. And I can say this is the same for my friends and my other family growing up. We didn't talk about, oh, goodness, well, you know what these white people said to me, or that just wasn't our experience. And so me having that type of experience growing up, and even now, so the pushback against me, Black conservatives and Republicans, is that we're supposed to acknowledge racism at all times.
Well,
Like,
let's put some of this up. For example, you and I have talked about Larry Elder before. He's from my hometown. He's from Los Angeles. He's Black. I mean, literally from the heart of Los Angeles. Larry Elder from the hood was running to oppose Governor Gavin Newsom on his recall. For those that don't know, let me add this to the screen there. But he, right there, he would have been the first non-white governor of California. And this is a man that, grew up and made something of himself from the heart of Los Angeles, bad neighborhood, came from nothing. And here, this is when he's campaigning. This is, as you can see from the New York Post, this is from September 9th, 2021. And Fox News was covering it. They're about the only ones who did, really, because I think if it was anywhere, if the shoe was on the other foot, if Larry Elder was a Democrat, not a Republican, everywhere.
Absolutely.
Because what you see right here is a white woman, clearly. I don't know if the pink hair is hers or it came with the mask, but she's wearing a gorilla mask. She's egging right there, egging Larry Elder. Okay.
Yep.
White woman egging Larry Elder. Now, if you switched his jersey from red to blue, this would have been headline news, coast to coast, Black gubernatorial candidate attacked by racist white woman in downtown LA or whatever.
These type of things are condoned. And I'll give you the perfect parallel to this. I'm sure you remember the tarmac meeting between Barack Obama and Jan Brewer. Jan Brewer, was she governor of Arizona?
Governor of Arizona. I was working in Arizona at the time.
So this is perfect then. So
maybe not the time, but when she was governor, rather. I don't remember exactly when the Barack Obama thing was, but it might have been when I was
around the border or something. I can't even remember what the issue was, but she wagged her finger.
Right. Yes.
In Barack Obama's face. And she was called a racist. I mean, the media, they carried this story 24 hours a day. And so here you have a white woman not wagging her finger. She's wearing a gorilla mask. Why a gorilla mask? I have no idea. Like, what is the gorilla mask connection?
She assaulted him. She threw something at him.
Eggs.
And it hit him. It hit him.
The media just shrug. They shrug because they always shrug when it comes to Black conservatives. When Tim Scott gave the
We've got
response
that too. New
to
York Post right here.
the, yeah, so Tim Scott gave, I think it was after Biden's State of the Union or something.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay. Tim Scott gave the rebuttal, the Republican rebuttal after
Yes.
Biden's State of the Union. And Tim Scott said that America was not a racist country.
Right. And it says Twitter allows Uncle Tim
Uncle
to
Tim.
trend for hours after Senator Tim Scott's rebuttal. And then they finally took action. So here's the trending from the New York Post.
Yeah,
Right here, trending Uncle Tim. Now we know
yeah,
the other thing is Uncle Tom.
right.
And
And
that's what
so,
they are making reference to, obviously, with letting this trend for
yep,
hours,
yep.
12 full hours.
Hmm. It was allowed in, it was MSNBC, it was CNN, all of the major outlets. Once again, Fox was the only one who was covering it in a way where people were rightly, offended by it. But these type of things are allowed. And what made this even worse is that Tim Scott is often called that. But what he said is that
Wow.
that America is not a racist country. People forget the day after he said that, Joe Biden said that America was not a racist country. On that same day,
Mhm.
Kamala Harris said that America is not a racist country. The very next day, Jim Clyburn, who's I think the third highest ranking official in the House on the Democratic
Yes.
side, he said that America was not a racist country. So what was Tim Scott's injury? His injury
Right.
was being a Republican. That's all
Right.
it was. And they allow this. This is how the
Look
people are
at this.
so.
This is a white man.
Oh,
I
yes.
don't know who Scott
Yeah.
Nevins is, but he's a blue check official person.
The nerve.
Senator Tim Scott SC is Uncle Tomming it for his life. So sad. South Carolina should be ashamed. That's
That would never be
incredible.
allowed. It would never be allowed if Tim Scott were a Democrat. White, and just so when circling back, when I was talking about those white women
Hmm.
outside the restaurant here in DC, they are made to feel comfortable speaking to Black people like that because it's mainstream, it's condoned. So this guy, of course he's going to say this, of course Joe Biden is going to say that if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. Of course
Right.
he is, because
Somehow
he's
that's
around people.
acceptable.
They've made him comfortable saying these type of things because it's specific to Black Republicans, and it doesn't matter who it is. And so that's why I have a certain steel in my spine when it comes to discussing race, because I don't hate white people. I don't hate anyone. I didn't grow up in a home where I was indoctrinated to hate anyone simply because of, for any reason, and definitely not because of the color of their skin. And again, I
Right.
grew up in my family, total Democrats, but I didn't grow up with people saying, well, we hate those white people. And
Right.
I'm from Mississippi. I'm from Mississippi, but it's not allowed. We can't have those type of conversations, because if we do, then we are called sellouts and Uncle Toms, because I don't wake up every day trying to figure out how white people have oppressed me.
Really? I
That's
mean,
the problem.
is that what it's like within the Black community though, or is this a thing that you feel put on you by the white
So,
community?
so this is when I say this, I think it's really specific to, so there is a culture definitely within the Black community that fuels this. But when I have conversations, much like when you were saying about, your community, I can sit down with diehard Democrats and talk about all of these things that I said, how I grew up. And it's like, well, yep, that's what my mother, she did not play that. My father did not play that. They made us go to church. They made us go to Sunday school. They did all of these things. But these are the conversations that they have behind closed doors.
Sure.
In public, online, much different conversation. I have people who I'm on television with, some where we can have a conversation about certain race issues behind closed doors, but their public persona is the white man racist, systemic racism, white privilege. And it used to irritate me because I'm like, but wait a minute, we just had this conversation yesterday, and now because you're on television,
in front of a camera, yeah.
But this is what fuels that culture. Like, let's hate police, let's hate white people, let's white privilege, let's be so consumed by race because it's financially profitable for people, but it's also an excellent electoral strategy for the Democratic Party. Hence,
that is true.
Them getting 90% of our vote.
That is true. But now, what shocked me when you were saying, I'm pulling up The View here, and I'm not sure who Greg Price is, but but he posted this thing from ABC's The View, and here are 3 minority women, right? There's Sunny Hostin, who's a lawyer, used to be on CNN, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know who this woman is, and I know this is Ana Navarro, who is a conservative Latina, and it would appear, according to this person's tweet, that Sunny Hostin got hostile with this woman here on the right for being a Black conservative. Do you want to play what she says? All right, let's take a listen. Let me pull that up and we'll take a listen to this. Bear with me as I navigate.
Chris Cuomo, I know this may be a novel point, a novel idea for somebody who's, a supporter of Trump, but there are people who are capable of being related and not having ethical interests.
There's many things that I don't stand by that Trump did. Trump has done things that are racist. I'm a Black woman first, so always understand that. But I do say that I have many conservative values that I will talk to you about. And so if you look at your network that you're standing behind, yes, and when you look at your network that you're standing behind, you're saying that you look at Chris Cuomo.
I feel like that's an oxymoron, a Black Republican.
You feel like it's an oxymoron?
I do.
Why? Your friend right here is a Republican.
We had this conversation many times.
You do, and you say you feel like it's an oxymoron that you're Catholic, but you also are pro-life.
I don't understand either.
No, you don't understand yourself. Then you have disagreements.
I understand myself. I don't understand either of
this. But it's not a personal conversation.
Yeah.
We're having a personal conversation about CNN and how things can get leaked.
And I don't understand Latino Republicans.
Well, here's today this is not.
All right, I'm going to stop it right there. She said it right there. She doesn't understand Black Republicans or Latino Republicans, and that these are somehow oxymorons.
Yeah. So what she's talking about is the complete fealty that especially Democrats feel as if Black people should have to the Democratic Party.
Or minorities in this case. It sounds
minorities. So if with 90%, and I always say, so would you guys, is it better to have 100% of Black, because we're already at 90.
Right.
So we're talking a very small number, like
almost
a very small number who votes Republican, a very, very small number.
Right.
So would you be happy only if 100% of us did it? Because no other group does this. No other group does this at all. But Sunny, you can go across, whether it's a Joanne Reed or whether there's many other people, they are offended that maybe 10% of Black people vote Republican. 10%.
Or in any other direction.
You have 90%. You're offended, and Sunny,
so they're demanding complete fealty.
Complete fealty. Like 90% isn't enough.
Drink the Kool-Aid, or you're not one of us. Is that what that means?
Or you are not one of us. And so I dismiss people like Sunny, Whoopi Goldberg, and many of those others, because again, me embracing being because I used to be hesitant and apprehensive to kind of share, like, well, I don't hate white people. Like, I used to be like apprehensive to even say that, because depending on which circles I'm in, people are like, what you mean? Because white people did this 100 years ago. Well, I don't know. I don't know them.
And it didn't happen to you.
It didn't happen to me. And I am guided by my experiences in my own life. I can't say that I've had those type of negative experiences. My ancestors absolutely did, but I didn't.
Right.
So you want me
Right.
to judge anyone, white people, Asian people, whatever the case may be, you want me to judge a whole group of people based on experiences I didn't have. And because we've become so comfortable with superimposing race, particularly Black people, over all else, we're allowed. So Sonny can say stuff like that. Other people can make these type of comments about Black people. And we can even say, we can even recoil at this idea that there was an anti-Asian hate crime bill. Well, I follow a reporter out of, I think she's in San Francisco, Dion Lynn.
Oh, I follow her too.
I follow her. And so I was already, prior to 2020, I was following her. And so she's actually been very out there, probably one of the leading ones when it comes to violence against Asian Americans. Community.
Yep.
The assumption is that, especially with Trump and the 2020 and that it was white people, like white people are out there attacking Asian people, and she doesn't make it a white versus Black issue at all. But if you look at the footage of who are the ones committing these crimes, it's typically Black and like Latino, like people
other
who
minorities.
are committing the other minorities who are doing this. But you can't say that, because to say that somehow marginalizes or diminishes the impact that racism has had on Black people. But these things happen. So when that bill came out, a lot of Black people were so upset. It's like, well, look at what they're doing for the Asian community. When in fact, if they actually looked at the bill, because I'm one of those boring ones who actually reads bills, nothing in the bill was specific to Asians at all. In fact, it made it easier to file hate crime charges across the board.
That on anybody for anything. For anything.
But the people, it was
sold that way. It was sold as an anti-Asian hate.
Which I think wasn't, it was a bad move for the Biden, for Democrats and the Biden administration, because it was never that. But it was okay to actually be upset that Asians were being a focus, because Black people weren't. Somehow, Black people, who are always the subject when it comes to racism, discrimination, Black people are always there. So, but because we had to share just a little bit of that with the Asian community, it was okay to be upset about it. It was okay to be upset about it. It's like, but you guys didn't even read the bill, because it wasn't, you can't name anything in the bill that said this is for Asians alone.
Right.
Everybody benefited.
Like this protects Asians. Right. There's nothing.
And we won't even talk about the crimes that are consistently being committed against Asians. If the majority, and I'm just going by what I see, whether it's on the East Coast or the West Coast, if white people were the larger perpetuator of the violence against Asians, it would trend every week. It would trend every single week. But because they're not, we don't really talk about it. And so the crimes being committed against Asians, we will have people like Dion Lynn talking about it, but no one in mainstream media talks about this.
Well, there's another reporter in New York, Saifon Kim. He's a good one to follow about the Asian hate stuff, because he does the same thing as Dion. He does the same thing as Dion, and he's in New York City. So he posts a lot of that stuff. And I followed all of that. And, when the Georgia massage parlor shootings happened.
Yes.
And of course, it obviously, number one, it's a mass shooting. We always cover in this country mass shootings wall to wall, right?
Yep.
The bigger deal was made because it was during the whole COVID anti-Asian hate that was on the rise, and that he was a white guy with an Asian fetish. Right. He's a young white man with an Asian fetish. And, at the end of the day, the guy's not charged with a hate crime. He's charged with all this other stuff. Obviously, it's a mass shooting. He's murdered like 8 people. That fine. Okay. I get it. But it mattered for the Asian community when he actually expressed that he thought Asian women that look like me, were too much of a temptation. So he didn't want to sin because he had a religious
Yes.
background, that we were causing him to have sinful thoughts. And he specifically kept bringing up the race, Asian, 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 and yet somehow he doesn't get charged with a hate crime.
Nope.
And that's
Nope.
okay, fine. But that's, the news media covered it as, oh, look, white man committing Asian hate. White man,
Yeah.
Asian hate, right? That's what that is. White man, Asian hate. And that took all the air in the room. Meanwhile, I mean, it's obviously it's just an egregious crime. It's an egregious crime to begin with. But the fact that every day at the height of all of this, right? If you recall, there are people Asian women being pushed off the subway platforms in New York.
Elderly women, elderly men.
Old men, old Asian ladies and men being literally beat up on the street daily.
On the street?
Daily. But no one wanted to talk about who was committing those crimes. And if you follow Dion or Saifon Kim, you see all of these things. And nobody still, apart from the Asian community, were saying, hey, these crimes are being perpetrated on our community by other minorities. And
no one talks about it. Even now. And I don't want people out there to think that this just happened in 2020 or 2021. They're happening consistently now. Like, it's happening now, and we don't talk about it. But we can't talk about it because, for one,
we're marginalizing Black people.
Right. You're trying to, out of all the stuff that Black people go through and all. Yes, our history speaks for itself. Slavery, all of that. And
you brought up a good point, and I don't want to miss it, because earlier you brought up how, none of this stuff happened to you. It happened to your great grandmother, right? Well, the people that perpetrated those things aren't alive either.
They aren't alive.
They are. You are now looking at the great grandson of maybe somebody that had a slave or was racist. But the people here today didn't do those things. Why are we paying for sins of the father?
Very few white people. So it was also aside from the inhumane nature of slavery, it was also an economic thing. So not every white person owned slave because they couldn't afford to.
No. It was a very small minority of
people. A very small number.
A very wealthy people in America. Nobody was wealthy in the 1700s. So
no, 1800s, 1900s,
and 18, right? Very, very small number of people were wealthy. It's only now that we're seeing the amount of wealth explode across the United States. I mean, I think it was like something like the term millionaire was like a big thing in the 80s, right? In the 80s, early 90s. Suddenly the internet boom happens. Now we have like hundreds of thousands of millionaires in America. Yes. But that's a new thing.
Looking, and apparently, I was just looking that apparently New York has the largest number, I believe, of the world's millionaires.
Yes. Well, that number is starting to dwindle. No, they still are the leading, but that number has dwindled because a lot of those multimillionaires
are they moving to Florida?
During COVID, Florida, or they've aged out and you go to Florida. That's the rule in New York, right? And you get older, you move down to Florida. Doesn't matter what color you are. You just if you're in New York, you go down to Florida. But that's the concentration of wealth was in a very small minority group of wealthy men. Men in the 1700s, 1800s, early 1900s. That, the actual number of slaves were not that huge. I mean, I'm not downplaying the horrors of slavery by any means. No, God, no. But
the number of slave owners, it wasn't a large. Small. They just didn't have the money. I mean, it literally only people who were and to put it in context, we're talking about, so Black people were considered property. In order to own property, you had to have money in order to own property. And not every white person owned property because they couldn't afford it. Right. They just couldn't afford it. So no, I'm not going to every day say, oh, well, white people, no, they didn't. Yeah, sure, my ancestors, absolutely. But I'm not going to when they say, holding people, a child accountable for the sins of their father.
Right.
I'm just not going to do that. That's not in me. That's not how I was raised. But that actually offends a lot of people. And so the conversation about most Black Republicans and conservatives don't hold the entire white race responsible for what happened to our ancestors. That is, a large number on the left do that. And even some of them are hypocritical in how they go about that, because they don't have these antagonistic relationships with white people, but like our Black politicians, they benefit politically from it. They benefit, their organizations make tons of money, playing into this Black victimhood. That's what it is. It's all a dance.
Exploitation. It's exploitation of people's biases and fears, and the term that you brought up very early on in our conversation is virtue signaling. And I think we've got a lot of that going on. So, you can't, it's not enough to just
I'm sorry, I'm talking to my dog, so he's under my leg here. Yes.
I figured it was him. He wants dad's attention. But you're right with the whole virtue signaling thing, right? I mean, it really became a big thing, especially during COVID, because I think people were looking for something to attach themselves to with virtue signaling. And it wasn't enough to just, wear your
mask. No.
Well, that's not enough. Then you had to put your BLM stickers up on the window, and you had to, put whatever pin on your sweater. Whatever.
And look where we are now, because we talked about it. I'm not gonna go too far into, but we talked about it on the show. The segregated dorms thing, because as I was doing some research on that,
we talked about this on Fault Lines for people that missed it or aren't sure what we're talking about. We talked about it on the radio show. Was it yesterday morning or the day before? Monday? Might have been Monday.
Either Friday or Monday. It was one of the two. But
people kept calling in about that.
Yes, and because it was a thing, and I think it was the SoCal University or something. It was somewhere in California where they had literally minority housing. Well, it wasn't just minority housing. The common spaces, white people were not allowed in the common
race
spaces.
specific areas.
And there are people who defend that as necessary.
This is like choosing segregation. And I mean, I'm not a proponent of that. I've talked about it on air. You've heard where I stand. I mean, I guess if this is a matter of Republican or Democrat, and this is a Republican issue, then I guess I would fall on that camp for this particular issue. Because I just don't, I mean, again, I was the one Asian kid in a like 80% community of Hispanic, Mexican to be specific. I was like the one, I mean, there were other Asian kids, but in my particular neighborhood, I was the one Asian kid. And in elementary school, maybe I experienced, some name calling, but I mean, kids are kids.
Kids are
elementary
kids.
School. It's kids. You're kids.
Right.
But by the time I got to high school, I mean, we know better, and, race didn't matter. We had a couple Black kids. There were a couple other Asian kids. There were, a whole mishmash of us. Still, the school was about 75% Hispanic, Mexican. And race was never an issue. It was just not a thing. There were white kids, Black kids, Indian, Native American, you name it. We're all there, but still 75% Hispanic, 25% everything else. But race was never an issue. And we never, if anything, we joked with each other about it. Nowadays, I know people say that's, you're still being racist, even if you're joking with one another, with your friends, even. You can't even do that. You can't even joke about racial stereotypes of your own with your friends of other races. And that's kind of where we've gotten, right, in society, that we can't even laugh at our own cultures because that's taboo. And somebody of another culture will tell me I'm a bad Asian for laughing at, I don't know, a bad Asian driver joke or, whatever.
A joke.
It's a joke. But that's just where we're at, right? And I'm just shocked to learn these details. I mean, I never bother to really think it until you and I started talking about this on the radio program, where I thought, gosh, like people really have a visceral reaction to a Black conservative. And
Yeah.
I didn't know. I just didn't.
Don't let me say, well, I feel bad for her family. Oh, it's so sad that the Queen died. Don't be Black and say that, because it's like how could you
Right.
not be upset because the history of colonialism and
Right.
it's like, bruh, I didn't suffer from colonialism. What are you talking about? Like that
Right.
that didn't happen to me. Britain didn't do that to me here in America. But as you saw, and I'm sure you even saw online, the notion that somehow you could express any type of sadness or and it's not like people were like it's not as if people were as they are in the UK. It's not like people were crying in the streets about this. They were saying, "Oh wow, that's sad. Oh
Like,
wow."
oh, what a shame. Like, oh.
As you would when anyone dies.
I mean,
it's
I
just
said
like
that
common decency.
I said that when Betty White died. I was like, oh, another old white lady.
You didn't
Just
know
saying.
her.
I didn't know Betty White. But
I don't know the Queen, but I
Betty
do
White.
know that the Queen, the life that she lived, I never heard anything. The monarchy, sure, but I never heard anything bad like about the Queen herself.
Right, like
what
she
she
was
did.
some wicked lady or something. That I'd never
I
heard that
never
either.
heard anything. And no, even now, you don't hear the criticism of her. It's not that she was a certain way. She was part of a family legacy or monarchy that worked. But you don't hear people saying, I remember when the Queen was XYZ. But as you know, to even say, to express any type of sympathy, it's like, how dare you? Because what?
Right.
Because I have to be worried about the colonialism that occurred. And this is in the UK. Like, it's not, there are some real issues in America. I'm one generation from segregation and all of this type of stuff. I endured, my family endured that here. Why do I have to be so consumed by colonialism? And I just think I think those things are just distractions.
I mean, I can't believe we're at that stage. And that's when it was brought to my attention about basically people calling into question your Blackness because you expressed any sorrow or sympathy for a family that just lost this old lady. At the end of the day, that's what she is. She's somebody's grandma,
96 years old,
great grandma, somebody's mother. You expressed some sympathy for that. And then there were so many calls that were, it was almost as if they called into the question of your Blackness.
Yes,
because you
it
felt
happens
sad
all the time
that a white lady died. Like you can't even be civil.
And this is what I meant when I said that people, it's like they're offended that I don't hate white people. So that's what that is. It's how dare you not hate white people? Like I can't imagine living my life with hatred. Yeah, there are people I don't like. There are people I don't like, but I just can't imagine being so consumed with hating groups of people for no reason other than they're in those groups.
Right. I don't hate any groups myself in particular. I might hate individuals. There are certain people on this earth
of all groups. There are Black people I don't like. I'm sure there are Asian people you don't like. They're white people, Black. I mean, we internalize these even in our interactions with each other. Any negative, especially with Black people, any negative experience that you have with someone who's not Black, it's a racist experience. There may be white people who just don't like me because of my personality, because of whatever, something I said to them. It will have nothing to do with race.
Right.
It just doesn't. But every negative interaction, I was walking down the street and this white lady was looking at me. She was looking at me because she thought I was going to rob her. It could be because of how I'm dressed. And how do I know that? Because I've had Black women, this whole do-rag conservative thing. When I'm in my do-rag, in my hoodie, walking, I've had Black women look the same way as white women because they are assuming things about me that aren't true.
Right.
But these aren't experiences that are limited to. If my mother was, in a store or something and she saw somebody come in with a hoodie, or they just had a certain look, I'm pretty sure my mom would kind of probably
Clutch a
be
little
more
bit.
aware.
Yeah.
She would, but it exists across the board. But if a white person does that, then they're doing it because they're racist.
I know.
Yeah.
I've seen elevator. I mean, I shouldn't be going on too long because I promised you 30 to 45-ish minutes, and now I'm bending your ear for a lot longer. But
Oh, no, it's fine.
I've seen video footage of women of every race being assaulted in an elevator, in wherever, right? In a
Yep.
confined, we'll just call it confined space, be
Yep.
it like in an ATM vestibule, whatever. If they're in a confined space and there is a sick, and it is what it is. It's always a man, right? Black, Latino, Asian, whatever. It's a man.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. If you get caught at the wrong time, wrong place, wrong time, it just happens. But these women, for example, there's one I saw more recently of I couldn't tell if she was Latino or white, but she was in an elevator and I couldn't tell if he was Latino or black, but he had darker complexion. She gets in the elevator. He's alone in the elevator. She gets in the elevator. I guess she talked to somebody that conveyed her story later, but that she had, for a second, thought she felt something creepy vibes about this man. But the elevator opens, and instead of waiting for the next one, it's like 4 a.m. or something. She gets in anyway. She gets assaulted, groped, and like he tries to do something to her in the elevator. She makes way, gets out, and the guy runs off. So they were looking for this guy. So my whole point to sharing that story is that as a woman, you get vibes. You feel the vibe, right? Like I have straight up skipped elevators if I'm alone, it's, late somewhere, or just for any reason. I feel any creepy vibes, I'm not getting in that elevator with you.
Yeah.
I'm just
and that's
not doing
across
it.
the board. It doesn't matter
I don't
what.
care what race or whatever. If the guy gives me creepy vibes, I'm either getting right off or I'm just not even going to get on. I'll wait for the next elevator. Don't care. But so this woman conveyed that to her friend that shared her story, and they managed to get the video footage from the elevator. And I don't remember where I saw it. It might have been New York Post, or I saw it somewhere online, and I thought, well, this is why, as a woman, you need to keep your wits about you and not try to say, well, she said I didn't want to be racist and stereotype.
Yep.
That's at least what she told her friend. That's at least what she told her friend. And so she probably, that thought crossed her mind that she didn't want to appear racist. So she got in anyway, because he was a different race than her. She got in. She is some sort of, what would appear to be white, goes in, and something happens within a couple of floors. And then she comes bursting out of the elevator and he runs the other way. But the assault happened. And that's for any woman. If you
with
just
any woman, I can't tell you the number, and I joke about it often, because sometimes I've actually been on an elevator and I'll joke and I said, don't try to rob me if it's a woman or something, because it's more like an icebreaker, depending on how I'm looking. Like, so if I'm looking like this with my hoodie on or my do-rag or whatever, I go the effort of like kind of breaking the ice a bit, because I know that they view me, whether it's, and I'm talking about women of any race, but I know that they respond differently if I'm wearing a suit.
Sure.
If I walk into a store, I'm responded to differently if I'm wearing a suit versus if I'm, just my casual do-rag look. And it doesn't matter if who the person is, they just respond differently. So that's not even a race thing. One of my good friends, she's white, and she hates young white men with long hair. She hates it, and her
Like the
daughter
grunge
just
look?
oh my goodness, you talking about a stereotype? Like, she stereotypes them as lazy, weed smoking, and her daughter now happens to be dating one. But like, even with her, and these are white guys, like, so they're based on how you look, people have certain they make certain assumptions about you that aren't just tied to race. And that's my overall point. We make assumptions about people that aren't just tied to race. And it's okay to acknowledge that. And so people conflate racism, bigotry, and prejudice. Like, those are three different things. You can be prejudiced towards someone and not be racist.
Right. Absolutely. In that case, in that story, prejudice against long-haired white guys. That's fine. You could be.
Yeah.
And also, don't assume I'm good at math, because I don't ask me to do your taxes.
That is a stereotype, and it's okay to actually make jokes about it too. Right.
Like, I'm okay to laugh about that, and others, if you're Asian and watching, it's okay to laugh at it. It's okay. Yeah. But the sad part is, Malik, that's where we're.
But don't say I like fried chicken though, and I can tell you, I do like fried chicken. It is my favorite food. Korean fried chicken. It is some kind of good.
Now, see, that is the perfect cross-pollination that I should end at right there. Because let me tell you, there's a place that, have you been to Bonchon?
No.
Oh, Malik, we're going to have to take you to Bonchon. It is Korean fried chicken. Amazing. I'm gonna have to send you a link after this recording is over.
Please do. Please do.
We're gonna have to go eat there. There isn't one in DC, but we're gonna have to bring you out over the bridge into Northern Virginia, where I'm at.
Okay, we'll do it.
And if you're okay with it, because Virginia was capital of the Confederacy. If you're okay with that,
I said that. I always say if I win the Powerball, I'm moving to Virginia.
That's right. So. I'm obviously kidding, because I know you don't care. But the Korean fried chicken here, I'm giving them a free shout out. Bonchon. I'm going to send you the link. Your mouth is going to water. That's going to make both of us happy. Asian fried chicken, Korean fried chicken. Make both of our communities happy right there. That's how we'll build the bridge, by the way, Bonchon.
I love it.
Build the bridge. But no, thank you so much for sharing I guess all these years I've spoken to you, I've never asked you how you became a conservative. If you were born and you're like, I'm a conservative, or or there was an actual journey. And for you, there was an actual journey, and sharing your experience.
That didn't start with Donald Trump.
Right. That the wheels started turning during the Obama era and during the Bush era, and how that all those pieces finally came to form at 2015, 2016.
Right.
And it was actually because Hillary Clinton, she red-pilled you.
Yeah.
By accident.
That was it.
She had the exact adverse effect that they didn't want. Yeah. Which is funny. So that's here we are. But yeah, I wanted to hear your story. I wanted to share your story. And it's just very upsetting to me that people can't respect other people's. It's a political view. It doesn't make anybody better or worse than the other because they vote this way or that way, or not at all. It's just that's where we're at. And I felt like it was an important conversation to be had, because it was so highlighted to me while you were co-hosting with me. People were so upset that because you've, expressed any sadness for a deceased royal. Yeah. Can't do it. Yeah. So thank you so much, Malik. I know it's like personal stories and it's important, I think.
No, I appreciate it. I love talking about this stuff because most people don't know. They assume, or, most people don't ask. They just assume.
I also just assumed. I assumed because you're from Mississippi, it's a red state. I assumed it's just you must have grew up conservative.
Nope.
But you had a whole journey behind it, and I think a lot of people a lot of people experience that and are looking for something to relate to. And I thought it was, very cool for you to share. And you've been very open about it on the radio. So I
Oh,
appreciate that.
absolutely.
I appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
I
And I look
totally
forward to
appreciate
having
it.
you on again.
I
Maybe more
know.
about other topics because you and I
Yeah, of course.
are friends, obviously. And
Yeah.
I think people liked hearing you on fault lines. So
And I'm going to stay on when you hit the stop recording. I'm going to stay on and mention something to you.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna end the recording right here. Folks, thank you
Okay.
so much for staying tuned. That's Melik Abdul, conservative commentator. You may have seen him if you followed my old show In Question. He's been a great guest co-host the last 2 weeks on Fault Lines Radio on Sputnik, or Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik, rather. So thank you so much, Melik. I'm going to end the
Thank you.
broadcast. End the broadcast there. Thank you for staying with us, rambling on today, talking about race. And we'll see. Maybe the black vote will swing for the red tide in November because I don't know. Biden's not that
We're
popular.
all watching. Thanks
We're
for having
watching.
me.
Thank you.